In the heart of Africa lies a country of staggering contradictions. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is a place of immense natural beauty, and honestly, even greater natural wealth. Its great river, a curving spine of water, nourishes a vast rainforest, second only to the Amazon. Beneath this lush green canopy, the earth holds treasures that have powered the modern world. There is copper, gold, and diamonds. There are the materials for our phones and our electric cars, like cobalt and coltan. This incredible bounty should have made the Congo one of the richest nations on earth. It should have provided its people with a life of prosperity and peace. Yet, history has written a different, far more tragic story for this land and its people. The story of the Congo is a story of plunder. For more than a century, outsiders have looked at this rich land and seen only profit. They have come not to build, but to take. The wealth has been drained away, flowing into the pockets of European kings, foreign corporations, and corrupt leaders. The people of the Congo have been left with the consequences: violence, poverty, and instability. Their fight for freedom and control over their own destiny has been long and bloody. It is a struggle that continues to this day, a constant battle against the ghosts of a brutal past and the challenges of a difficult present. The world often forgets this story, but it is etched into the very soil of the Congo. Despite this history of exploitation and suffering, the spirit of the Congolese people endures. It is a spirit of incredible resilience. It is found in the vibrant music that echoes from the streets of Kinshasa, a sound that has influenced artists across the globe. It is seen in the powerful art that tells stories of both pain and hope. It is heard in the voices of activists and ordinary citizens who refuse to be silenced, who continue to demand a better future for their children. Their strength is the Congo's greatest and perhaps most overlooked resource. It is a testament to the human capacity to survive, to create, and to keep fighting for justice against overwhelming odds. This land of paradox forces us to ask difficult questions. How can a place so rich be home to so many who are poor? How did a history of colonial greed shape the world we live in today, from the tires on our cars to the batteries in our devices? The journey through the Congo's past is not an easy one. It is a path marked by cruelty and betrayal. But it is also a story of courage, of resistance, and of an unyielding hope for a future where the wealth of the Congo finally belongs to the Congolese. It is a story that the world must not turn away from, for it is a reflection of our shared history and a lesson for our shared future. Long before the first European ships navigated the treacherous mouth of the Congo River, this vast territory was not an empty wilderness. It was a continent of its own, alive with complex societies and vibrant cultures. Great kingdoms rose and fell, their influence stretching across thousands of miles of savanna and forest. These were not primitive tribes as later colonial narratives would claim. They were organized states with sophisticated systems of governance, extensive trade networks, and rich artistic traditions. The history of the Congo did not begin with the arrival of white men. It was merely interrupted by them, violently and irrevocably. Among the most powerful of these pre-colonial states was the Congo Kingdom, which flourished near the mouth of the Great River from the 14th century onwards. It had a centralized monarchy, a system of nobles and officials, and a thriving economy based on textiles, pottery, and metalwork. When Portuguese explorers first made contact in the late 15th century, they found a kingdom that was their equal in political organization. For a time, the two powers interacted as sovereign states, exchanging ambassadors and ideas. But this initial relationship of mutual respect would soon curdle as the insatiable demand for enslaved people began to tear the kingdom apart from within. Further inland, deep in the savanna heartlands, other powerful empires held sway. The Luba Empire, which emerged around the 16th century, was known for its intricate political structure, where power was balanced between kings and powerful secret societies. Luba artists created some of Africa's most beautiful and spiritually significant art, including elegant stools and memory boards known as lukasa, which chronicled their histories. To their west, the Lunda Empire built its power on controlling trade routes for salt, copper, and ivory. These empires were connected by commerce and diplomacy, creating a dynamic and interconnected world long before European mapmakers drew their first lines across the continent. These kingdoms were not utopias. They had their own conflicts, their own hierarchies, and their own forms of bondage, but they were living, breathing societies, shaped by their own histories and their own people. They understood the rhythms of the land and the river. They had laws, traditions, and a profound sense of place. The arrival of Europeans with their guns, their greed, and their profound sense of racial superiority would shatter this world. The intricate tapestry of pre-colonial life was about to be ripped to shreds, replaced by a system of exploitation more brutal than anything the region had ever known. At the end of the 19th century, one man looked at a map of Central Africa and saw not a land of people, but a blank space to be filled with his ambition. That man was King Leopold II of Belgium. He was a monarch with a small country but enormous greed. Through a masterful campaign of public relations and deceit, he convinced the world that his interest in the Congo was purely humanitarian. He spoke of ending the Arab slave trade and bringing civilization to the so-called Dark Continent. The great powers of Europe and the United States believed him. In 1885, they handed him personal ownership of a territory 76 times the size of Belgium, which he named the Congo Free State. It was not a state, and its people were anything but free. Leopold's rule was not a colonial project of the Belgian government, it was the private property of one man, run for his personal profit. His true goal was to extract as much wealth as possible as quickly as possible. The first boom was in ivory, but the real money came with the invention of the inflatable rubber tire. Suddenly, the wild rubber vines of the Congo's rainforest were a source of immense fortune. To get the rubber, Leopold unleashed a reign of terror upon the Congolese people. He created a private army, the Force Publique, made up of African soldiers led by ruthless European officers. The system was simple and honestly satanic. Villages were given impossibly high quotas for rubber collection. To force men into the forest for weeks at a time, their wives and children were taken hostage. Those who failed to meet their quotas were brutally punished. They were whipped with the chikot, a whip of raw, sun-dried hippopotamus hide that could scar a man for life or kill him. Those who resisted were shot. To prove they had not wasted their bullets on hunting, soldiers of the Force Publique were ordered to bring back the severed right hand of every person they killed. When quotas were not met, soldiers would often simply cut the hands off living people, including children, to satisfy their officers. This private hell, hidden deep in the African interior, could not remain a secret forever. Brave missionaries and shipping agents began to document the atrocities. People like George Washington Williams, an African-American journalist, and E.D. Morel, a British shipping clerk, became tireless crusaders. Morel noticed that ships arriving from the Congo were full of rubber and ivory, but the ships returning carried only soldiers and guns. He deduced that this was not trade, but slavery. Their work, alongside photographs of mutilated victims, sparked one of the first great international human rights campaigns of the 20th century. Under immense pressure, a reluctant Leopold was finally forced to relinquish his private fiefdom to the Belgian state in 1908. By then, millions of Congolese had perished. When the Belgian government took control of the Congo in 1908, the world hoped the worst was over. The overt brutality of Leopold's red rubber system was dismantled, but, honestly, the fundamental nature of the colony did not change. The goal remained the same, to efficiently extract Congo's immense mineral wealth for the benefit of Belgium. The new administration was less murderous but just as controlling. It was, a system of rigid paternalistic rule. The Belgians saw themselves as firm but fair guardians, treating the Congolese as children who needed to be disciplined and managed, but never as equals who might one day rule themselves. Life in the Belgian Congo was defined by segregation. A strict color bar separated the lives of Europeans and Africans. Cities were divided into white and black quarters. Congolese people were subjected to forced labor, not for rubber, but to build roads, railways, and work in the massive mines owned by Belgian corporations. The colonial state and big business worked hand in hand. Education for the Congolese was limited, focused primarily on basic literacy and vocational skills. The Belgians believed in training a workforce of clerks and laborers, not a class of intellectuals who might develop dangerous ideas about independence and self-determination. Despite the oppressive system, a new Congolese consciousness began to form. In the growing cities like Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, and Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, people from different regions and ethnic groups came together for the first time. They shared experiences of colonial injustice. A small, educated class of Congolese, known as Evolués, the evolved ones, emerged. They had adopted European customs and worked in the lower ranks of the colonial administration. Initially they sought only greater rights and acceptance within the Belgian system, not its overthrow. But the wall of colonial condescension they faced slowly turned their desire for assimilation into a demand for liberation. The winds of change blowing across Africa after World War II eventually reached the Congo. The idea of independence, once unthinkable, began to take root. Political movements started to form, demanding a voice for the Congolese people. The most charismatic and uncompromising of the new leaders was a former postal clerk and beer salesman named Patrice Lumumba. He co-founded the Mouvement National Congolais, or MNC, a party that called for a unified, independent Congo, free from tribal divisions and foreign control. His fiery speeches electrified the masses, giving voice to a century of pent-up frustration. The Belgian colonialists had built a prison. Lumumba was now rattling the bars. Belgium, stunned by the sudden intensity of the nationalist movement and riots in Leopoldville in 1959, abruptly decided to grant independence. The decision was hasty and ill-prepared. On June 30, 1960, the Democratic Republic of the Congo was born. The official ceremony was a study in contrasts. The Belgian king Baudouin gave a paternalistic speech praising Leopold II's genius. In an unscheduled response, the new prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, delivered a blistering indictment of colonial rule. He spoke of the insults, the forced labor, and the stolen dignity. For the Congolese people, it was a moment of pure catharsis. For the Belgians and their Western allies, it was an unforgivable offense. The new nation was immediately plunged into chaos. The army, still commanded by Belgian officers, mutinied just days after independence. The mineral-rich southern province of Katanga, encouraged and supported by Belgian mining interests, seceded from the new country. Belgium sent its own troops back into the Congo, claiming it was to protect its citizens, but effectively supporting the secession. Lumumba, his government collapsing, desperately sought help. He appealed to the United Nations, which sent a peacekeeping force. He also made a fateful appeal to the Soviet Union for technical assistance, a move that in the midst of the Cold War sealed his doom in the eyes of the United States. Washington and Brussels saw Lumumba not as a nationalist leader trying to hold his country together, but as a dangerous radical who might align the resource-rich Congo with the Soviet bloc. The CIA and Belgian intelligence services marked him for elimination. They saw him as an obstacle to their strategic and economic interests. In September 1960, just over 2 months after becoming prime minister, Lumumba was dismissed from office by the president in a politically murky maneuver. He was placed under house arrest, but later escaped, attempting to reach his political stronghold in Stanleyville, now Kisangani. He was captured by forces loyal to a young army colonel named Joseph Désiré Mobutu. Lumumba's end was brutal. With the complicity of Belgian and American officials, he was flown to the secessionist province of Katanga. There, on January 17, 1961, he and 2 of his associates were beaten and then executed by a firing squad commanded by a Belgian officer. Their bodies were later disinterred, hacked to pieces, and dissolved in acid to hide the evidence. Lumumba's death was a devastating blow to the dream of a truly independent and unified Congo. He became a martyr for anti-colonial movements worldwide, a powerful symbol of a brilliant future stolen, and a tragic testament to the ruthless geopolitics of the Cold War. After the chaos and Lumumba's murder, the man who had handed him over to his killers steadily consolidated his power. In 1965, Colonel Joseph Désiré Mobutu staged his second coup, this time seizing absolute control of the country. He would rule for the next 32 years. With strong backing from the United States and other Western powers, who saw him as a reliable anti-communist bulwark in Central Africa, Mobutu established one of history's most enduring and corrupt dictatorships. He presented himself as the father of the nation, the man who would bring stability and authenticity to a fractured country. Mobutu embarked on a campaign of authenticity to purge the country of its colonial legacy. He renamed the country Zaire, the river Zaire, and the currency the Zaire. He ordered citizens to abandon their Christian names for African ones. He himself became Mobutu Sese Seko Kuku Ingbendu Waza Banga. European-style suits were banned, replaced by a tunic of his own design called the Abacost. Cities were given new names. Leopoldville became Kinshasa, Stanleyville became Kisangani. On the surface, it was a powerful assertion of African identity. In reality, it was a cosmetic change that masked the creation of a cult of personality and the systematic looting of the nation's wealth. Mobutu's regime was a kleptocracy, a government run by thieves. He declared that all foreign-owned economic assets would be Zairianized, but this meant transferring them not to the state or the people, but to himself and his small circle of loyal elites. The country's vast mineral wealth, its copper, diamonds and cobalt, flowed directly into his personal bank accounts in Switzerland and France. While he built lavish palaces in the jungle and chartered Concorde jets for shopping trips to Paris, the country's infrastructure crumbled. Roads dissolved back into the forest, hospitals ran out of medicine, and the state withered away, leaving ordinary people to fend for themselves. For 3 decades, Mobutu skillfully played the Cold War game, ensuring Western support by positioning himself as a key ally against Soviet influence in Africa. Dissent was ruthlessly crushed by his feared security services. Any challenge to his authority was met with imprisonment, torture, or death. But when the Cold War ended in 1991, Mobutu's strategic importance vanished. His foreign patrons lost interest in propping up his rotten regime. The leopard, as he liked to be called, was suddenly vulnerable. The deep-seated anger and frustration that had been simmering for decades across the vast, impoverished country were about to explode. The end of Mobutu's reign did not bring peace. Instead, it uncorked decades of pent-up grievances and unleashed a torrent of violence that engulfed the entire region. The catalyst was the 1994 genocide in neighboring Rwanda. Over 1 million Hutu refugees, including many perpetrators of the genocide, fled across the border into eastern Zaire. Mobutu's weak and crumbling state could not control the situation. Rwanda, now under a new government, saw the refugee camps as a threat, and in 1996, backed a rebellion led by a veteran Congolese insurgent named Laurent Désiré Kabila to overthrow Mobutu. What followed was a swift and brutal campaign. Supported by the armies of Rwanda and Uganda, Kabila's forces swept across the country. Mobutu's unpaid and demoralized army simply melted away. In 1997, Kabila marched into Kinshasa, and Mobutu, riddled with cancer, fled into exile, dying shortly thereafter. Kabila renamed the country the Democratic Republic of the Congo, restoring its original name. But the celebration was short-lived. Kabila soon fell out with his Rwandan and Ugandan backers. When he ordered their troops to leave in 1998, they responded by backing a new set of rebel groups against him, plunging the country into a second, even more devastating conflict. This conflict became known as Africa's World War. It drew in the armies of at least 9 African nations and dozens of armed militia groups. The war was not fought for ideology, but for resources. The armies and militias financed their operations by plundering the Congo's mineral wealth, particularly coltan, a crucial component in mobile phones and laptops. A vicious cycle emerged: control the mines to buy weapons, and use the weapons to control the mines. The civilian population was caught in the middle, suffering unimaginable horrors. Millions died, not just from the fighting, but from the disease and starvation that followed the complete collapse of society. A formal peace accord was signed in 2003, and the country held its first democratic elections in over 40 years in 2006. But peace has remained fragile, especially in the eastern provinces. Armed groups, both local and foreign, continue to terrorize communities, preying on the population and fighting over control of the land and its valuable minerals. The legacy of these wars is a shattered nation struggling with deep-seated corruption, a lack of basic services, and endemic violence. Yet, amidst this struggle for survival, a new generation of Congolese artists, entrepreneurs, and activists are fighting for a different future. They are the enduring hope of a country that has suffered too much, for too long.